I see the gay marriage issue as a really important point because it's a direct attack on the institution of the family.
Yep.
The idea of the concept of gender. No, sorry. Gender is a social construct. The concept of sex, male sex and female sex.
Yeah.
And it's a direct attack on religion.
Yep.
And so it's a direct attack on civilization.
Let's change the topic here a little bit. We've had a really good discussion about Google and all that kind of thing. I wanted to have a talk about the gay marriage debate and where you think it's heading. I mean, there's been quite a lot of talk about it, obviously all through the Australian media, but I mean, we should touch on it just because it is the topic of the day. So where do you see that? Like, I mean, are you willing to make a prediction on where it comes, or how do you see it going?
I think the no vote will get up.
Yeah.
I think this will be another Brexit, another Trump election, another Pauline Hanson. I think that the reason that the left pushed so hard for not asking the general population is because they don't believe their own propaganda that like the majority of Australians support gay marriage. Like they put out these polls and they use that as the reason why we should just let the politicians.
They're all essential polls too. They're all essential polls who are owned by Fairfax. So I mean, this is what I'm not. I don't have any evidence to prove, or I don't have any evidence to prove that they're doctored polls. But at the same time, if they're putting out these polls and then they're reacting in this way, it sends a bit of a message. It's like if they're so confident, they should be like, yes, go send it to a vote.
Well, to me, it's just I see the same signs. I see all of the political elites, all of the media elites, the academic elites, the business elites getting behind this idea because they're virtue signaling and they think this is the way to go. As Adam Piggott pointed out, this is exactly the same thing that happened with the Republic. And like, if you watch the media, you would have thought the Republic was a shoo-in, but it failed. And I think it's the same thing with gay marriage. I think I made the argument a couple of years ago. I think that, like, for most people, like, not only do they not want it, it's like until recently it wasn't even an issue. Like, they didn't even consider it. And like you look at how the biggest sort of big name left-wing politicians like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, in Australia, Penny Wong, I think Bill Shorten as well. Like, even until a few years ago, they were like, oh no, I think that we just need civil partnerships, but gay marriage, we'll leave that alone. And it's like they just needed that undercurrent to just keep building and building to the point where now the argument is made, how can you have any opposition?
Anything else? Like, how could you possibly say no to this?
Yeah.
Which really, that annoys me the most.
Yeah.
That's what annoys me the most. The idea that, I couldn't possibly have another opinion. And here's the thing, like, I mean, up until this debate, probably, maybe not even up until this debate, I sort of noticed the trend a few years ago, like, in the way people talked about gay marriage, and, like, it didn't sit right with me. Like, philosophically and morally, obviously I have no issue with two men being together. I mean, that's their life, doesn't affect me. But I mean, I didn't have the arguments articulated as they have now, so I'd be able to articulate them back. But even then, it just seemed to me like it was being used as a political tool, as a way to demonise opposition and to demonise, the people who were in favour of gay marriage tended to be the kind of people that, it was like, oh, you're bad if you don't, it was even back then, it's like, oh, you're bad if you don't agree with it. Like, it's not you don't agree, it's that you're a bad person. And you see now, like, I mean, you see it now in that, in the way that people on the yes side are pushing it. It's like, you're bad, and how could you possibly think otherwise? And this is the funny one. Oh, I just see this all the time. You have no argument. And it's like, no, actually there are some very good, very, very good arguments against it. Some very strong, very evidence-based, very, very clear-cut arguments as to why you shouldn't do it. I mean, you might not like those arguments, or you might not agree with those arguments, but they're arguments, and they're good arguments. And
the strategy seems to be that they raise the argument, then they use something to disagree with it, and then they say, we've just disproved it. So now, if you're against gay marriage, you're a bigot.
You're a bigot, or it's the same thing. It's like if you don't agree with gay marriage, then you hate gay people. It's like that's ridiculous. Like that's idiotic. I mean,
if looking at a few of them specifically, like I see them. They do try to counter the argument. Well, you know, like we already have civil marriages. Sorry, civil unions.
Yeah.
And they'll argue, well, they don't actually account for this, and this. That's why we need gay marriage. I don't know if I've actually seen anybody if I've seen them counter the argument. Well, why don't you just amend civil unions?
I had that one come up the other day, and that's exactly what I said. It's like, well, if civil unions aren't adequate,
then make them more adequate.
Yeah. Like, change civil unions. Yeah. Don't change marriage, because once you change marriage, like, this is a bigger argument. You're sort of saying that gender doesn't matter, and the definitions between man and woman are no longer relevant, which is nonsense. And you have that issue permeates through society. And we have transgender blokes who are 100 kilos who are about to go and likely hurt and maim women half their size, which I don't think is a good idea.
Well, you know, they'll have to have their feelings come up against reality, I guess. So that what we're talking about then, like, gets into the next one where we're saying, okay, what are the implications of this? And like, you look at any debate that's happened over any important subject, and that's always been like one of the most important things. One of the things that the left is trying to do at the moment, and I've been trying to sort of mock it, is sort of say basically any kind of argument which says, well, this will lead to this, is a slippery slope. Yeah. But like you're looking at the logical consequence of what it
I actually had this. This was explained to me really well by Ben Shapiro. Well, not me personally. I always leave it to the world, and I watched the video. It's not a slippery slope argument. It's an application of principles argument.
Yes.
So they call it a slippery slope. I mean, a slippery slope argument can be valid if there's empirical evidence to support the slippery slope, in which there is with gay marriage. All you have to do is look at Bill 616, Canada, and
We've seen what happens in countries overseas. So you're
UK.
going more specific. Yeah.
But yeah, so with the application of principle argument, it's like, it's not the same as saying, well, if you do this, then you're going to slip into marrying children and that kind of thing. No, it's an application of principles argument. If you apply this principle, how does that apply across the board? So if you say marriage is between two consenting adults, how does that apply across the board? That means, brothers and sisters can get married. Mm-hmm. Brothers and brothers can get married. Yeah. That means if you're two consenting adults, then you can marry someone who is already in an agreement with two consenting adults. That means, instead of being one man and one woman, it's like it's any two consenting adults. So they might be married to someone else, but you can marry them because you're not marrying somebody else. Yeah. Like you're not marrying someone else who's already in the marriage.
The two consenting adults one is an important distinction because, again, on ABC 3LO, which I listen to because know thy enemy, somebody tried to make that argument, and Raphael Epstein was saying, no, that it's just like saying, like they'll allow bestiality, but that's not.
That's not an application of principles argument. An animal's not a consenting adult.
So he turned an application of principles argument into a slippery slope by a false analogy.
A straw man.
That's really
that's a straw man.
Okay,
which is a lot of their argument as well.
So basically from there it'll be okay. Well, if you want to change the definition on this, all of these arguments back up changing to incest, polyamory and polygamy. There's no, like, you can have arguments against those things, but all the arguments that you've made for changing the definition of marriage in the first place apply to any of these other kinds of relationships involving two consenting adults, which aren't hurting anybody else.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you say that like they aren't hurting anybody else, but obviously the children of the incestuous relationship.
Obviously, I'm being facetious.
Yeah, that's it.
Continue.
Yeah. So I mean, I will cover the polyamory thing just really briefly in that. There's a very good reason that we don't have polygamy as an accepted norm in our society. It's in one of my videos. I sort of discuss it briefly in one of my biology videos. It's on my channel, Matty's One Life. Go check it out. It's on where this video is being watched. Like and subscribe. So basically what happens is when you allow polygamy, especially the main form of polygamy is obviously one man, several women. When you have one man and several women, every time an extra woman goes into that relationship, that's one man who can't have that, who can't be married to that woman.
Yes.
So ultimately it means all the high status men have all the women, and the low status men are unable to get anything. Which
so basically, you're talking about what life is like for men in their 30s. It's the life we have now.
I once said the man's life starts
until their 30s. Yeah, in their 20s until their 30s.
Until their 30s. Yeah.
Basically, like, you know, girls, all the girls sleep with a small number of chads.
Yeah.
And then when they hit the wall, they marry the beaters who like didn't have much during their 20s.
Yeah, these days, the feminist result of feminism within our society. I think our society has seen that.
So
to a certain extent.
I know I'm going off on my
yeah.
So we've seen the impact on our society where like lowering birth rates, demographic decline, and so like with polyamory, with polygamy particularly, like basically that entrenches that system. And what
I was getting at is it actually becomes even worse in that it creates a big incentive for males to be violent and a man. And you see this I won't mention which one because we're not discussing that in this particular video, but there are societies around the world that are polygamous and also extremely violent. Now, I mean, that's probably not one cause, but there's probably a big combination of causes with that, but I would say that's a very big reason for it. Well, and it's a scientific fact. Polygamous societies tend to be more violent because a man who is unable to find a wife has a lot less invested in that society.
Yes. Men need to be civilized.
Yes.
If they don't see a benefit in the system, then there's no benefit for them.
There's no benefit. Exactly.
They're not tied down to anything. They can do whatever they want. Yeah. And they will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is the reason that we have... This is the reason we have monogamy in our society, and I think I used to be of the idea. I mean, I'm a libertarian. I used to be of the idea that, well, you know, you should be able to do this. And look, I mean, yeah, I guess, but at the same time, it should be extremely frowned upon. So it should be the kind of thing that if you do see a guy with two women, that guy should be shamed for that. And I think it's quite important. Anyway, we sort of already have that right now, but it's gone less so. Sort of like you said, on the wayside for girls in their 20s they're a lot more likely to sleep around. I don't think that's as bad. It's as bad as people think. I think because a lot of women are still in relationships. It's just more that they're not having children. They're choosing not to have. So they'll be with one guy, but they won't have a child with that guy until they're in their 30s, and then the guys, I don't know. Most guys don't realize this, but if you're relatively successful and relatively high intelligence, your 30s, it's a lot easier to meet girls in your 30s. It's a lot easier, and that's for you young guys out there. Your life starts at 30. Because you become smarter, you become more socially aware, and the feminists have told you that you're older and you should stick with girls your own age. It's not true. You can be in your 50s and you can pick up teenagers, and that's not a joke. Yeah. I mean, whether you'd want to, because you might not be able to tolerate their conversation, but you still can.
They talk a lot about their feelings. Basically use your 20s to get your act together.
That's it. Invest your time in your 20s. Get educated, get work experience. If you do find the love of your life, then that's even better. But it's not the end of the world if you haven't had everything by the time you're in your 30s. I mean, a man wants to settle down in his 30s. What I see, a big problem is that women see themselves as being able to do that. And it's kind of, women see themselves as being able to wait until their 30s to settle down, and it's...
Well, they've been lied to.
They've been lied to, big time,
and they all realise that just before they hit 30, unfortunately, which is, it's sad. It's interesting that we've segued to, talking about what we're talking about now. It's like we've gone meta. Really, this isn't about gay marriage. This is about what changed back in the 60s. Basically, the whole order of our society, which has existed for thousands of years, and which exists in other societies as well, and has existed in other societies for thousands of years. You look at China, it's been stable for how many thousands of years? Is it 3?
Oh, well, I wouldn't particularly call it stable. If you know anything about China, it's more
up and down.
China's more. But stability is through an iron fist.
They've continued.
They've done well, yeah.
Europe went like this, and then it shot past. But so we basically turned everything upside down, and we're seeing the consequences of it. And so I see the gay marriage issue as a really important point because it's a direct attack on the institution of the family.
Yep.
The idea of the concept of gender. Gender is a social construct. The concept of sex, male sex and female sex.
Yeah.
And it's a direct attack on religion.
Yep.
And so it's a direct attack on civilization. But it's taken a good 60 years to get to this point. And it's been building to this point. And it started back then. And so we're talking about sort of saying no to this right now. But the only way that this is going to be stopped, because the left aren't going to stop if they fall down here. Like, you know, they've succeeded in getting gay marriage in other countries, and they're going to keep trying to get it here until they get it. The only way to stop them is to look at the change that happened and say, okay, are we happy with that change? Like, was there a certain point along the way where we decided it went far enough, or do we think that once that change happened, where we are now is inevitable?
You say that,
so we need to go back there and go, okay, is there another way we could have gone?
Is it like, I mean, I like the idea of, I think obviously you do need to point out the flaws in the arguments of the left. I mean, it's tantamount. Where I may be slightly different, we probably don't differ too much in this, is that I think the strategy of people who do value logic and evidence and reason and just, you know, blind common sense, as opposed to the, you know, 2 + 2 = 5 arguments of the left, in that where they've done a lot of damage to discourse is by shaming and, you know, calling of bigots and crying of racists. And I just, honestly, I think this is actually happening quite a lot now, especially with the internet and people like, you know, Paul Joseph Watson, Stefan Molyneux, all these guys, and, you know, Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder is excellent. If you don't know Battle with Crowder, I'm going to go and watch the episode after this. It's great. He's hilarious.
3-hour interview of Jordan Peterson. I think he's got a couple.
That was Joe Rogan, I think you're talking about. Oh, right. Joe Rogan, yeah.
Well, there's another
Joe Rogan's good as well.
Yeah.
But I really like Stephen Crowder. Like, what they've really started doing is, rather than just talking the facts, really mocking and shaming them. And this is what I've started doing. I start really, you know, pointing out the immorality, like the fact that, like, if you are the kind of person that would rather shut up a Nazi than actually point out why they're wrong, you're actually worse than a Nazi. You are on a lower moral standing to a National Socialist. If you aren't willing to stand there and say, well, your arguments are incorrect, and back yourself and back the strength of your argument, and would instead want to just silence them because you don't like what they're having to say, you're less than a Nazi. You're a lower human being. In fact, you're a terrible human being. And that's, you know, think about that. You're less than a Nazi. You're lower than a Nazi. If you think that you have the right to shut them up, you're worse than them.
And that was part 3. Next up, the most important and final bit.